Yeah, surf the beat cause the bass is bubbling. Gotta get it in before it comes tumbling down. There's only so much time to find this kind of rhyme to express my mind. Cause everything that has ever been made.
Christmas, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the CageCast. I'm your host, Charlie, the Professor Esser, and with me, as always, is my skinny rich friend.
It's Mozz.
Hey, Mozz. So glad to have you as always. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you may have noticed that, hey, CageCast was a little late this week. It actually was not. Mozz and I diligently did our CageCast as usual, but technical difficulties interfered, and so we did not get our show recorded. Yes. There's some more technical difficulties over there. His name is Benjamin. So we are doing tonight's episode just to get a rep. Episode 5 of Season 1 of Luke Cage. Cottonmouth strikes back at Luke by taking his vengeance out on the people of Harlem, while Detective Knife and Scarf face an unexpected threat. Director was Mark Jobst, written by lots of people. Yeah, they got, because they always put all the comic book writers in there. It's like, come on, guys, you don't need to be listed first. This is, there we go. Jason Horwich is who wrote it, and of course, this is developed by Chio Hodari Coker. Okay. Now, one thing I do want to mention is this has one of the great musical openings of the season. Do you agree, Mozz?
Oh, indeed. It really was sort of like the rest of the season, they're sort of laying the groundwork of what kind of stylized show it's going to be. And here it's sort of like the best they've done on the show with this Long Live the Chief. Long live the Chief. Hail to the Chief, yes.
I still cannot, I have no idea half the words he said.
Yeah.
Except at some point he says bang bang.
Yeah.
So, of course, after that, which is a great scene, and, you know, one of the reasons why I think that scene feeds so well into our next scene is that it does have this almost fatalistic quality to it. This idea that, you know, hail to the chief, but, you know, it is this idea of almost, you know, the violence involved in power struggles and moving up and moving down. And, of course, when we get to the next scene, it's basically telling our good friend Cornell he's broke.
Yeah.
He's broke as a joke. You know, Luke Cage walked out of Fort Knox with he said 7 figures 7 times over is the closest we get to an actual number, which we can assume is at least $7 million.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I think they mentioned $7 million a few times.
Yeah, and you know, he's got about $250,000 cash laying around, and he's got assets. You know, he's not poor, but he's like Donald Trump. All of his money, he's a billionaire, but all of his money's tied up in stuff. You know, not the least of which is this great nation. Okay, we're not going to get too political on that note today. Yeah.
Also, important to mention that during that Long Live the Chief sort of musical intro, Claire Temple is back, and she has a little run-in with a mugger and proceeds to beat the crap out of the muggers.
Yeah, because she is Claire Temple. You know, it's like really, you know, I have fought, you know, The Hand and, you know, Zombie, Purple Men, you know, this is, you muggers, you really picked the wrong guy. Yeah. So, and that's good. And it's good to get Claire Temple back. Claire Temple is central to our theme here and central to our story. And, you know, it's an interesting thing about the Claire Temple dynamic, in this. Because, of course, if you're a comic book fan, you have this pre-assumed relationship between Luke and Jessica Jones, who we saw in the last thing. However, one of the things that the Marvel Cinematic Universe always does is break up that thematic. It changes what they're going to do. So, because they need to surprise you, you know? That's the thing. They can't do exactly what they did in the comic because, well, then you know exactly what's going to happen, you know?
Yeah. You know? That's not where it ends up just yet, but it might down the road, and you might get the Luke that you always wanted.
Well, I mean, and she may get back with, Luke may get back with Jessica eventually too, because of course they are going to be back in the Defenders. But at this point, the idea is that that everything is in flux. And you're really not supposed to be sitting here thinking, oh, everything is going to be just what we think it is. And that's one of the things I like about this. So, Claire Temple is back. And she hasn't even really met Luke Cage yet. I mean, she met her in Jessica Jones, but she really hasn't had any interaction with him. I'm just noting that she's an interesting character to have. And, of course, we also have who has already had coffee with Luke, is, of course, Misty Knight. Now, Misty Knight, of course, they are still working the cases, all the cases. We just, trying to track down what happened at Fort Knox, what happened at the gun deal that went south. Still working hard, and we get in this episode the statement from above her that Scarf is dirty. And of course, this leads to what I think is, in its own way, like one of the most heart-wrenching aspects of this series, is that she defends Scarf.
Right.
Like, she really hardcore, look, Scarf was there for me when I first started, and, I do not believe Scarf is a bad guy.
Right.
But we all already know, Scarf is totally dirty.
Yeah. And for as much as she sort of is the kind of person that notices everything that's off, she misses a lot.
Yeah. Well, and it goes to, and that's something we'll get to in the next episode, where there is this, it's sort of a willful ignorance, I think, because, it's not to tie it back to this recent election, but there is so much of it can't happen here. That's not who we are. That's not what the world is. Scarf, to her, Scarf can't be dirty. That's her best friend. That is her partner.
Right.
They have arrested so many people.
Right.
If Scarf was dirty, why is he? And it is this idea is like, if he was really that dirty, why is he still a cop? And of course, because you can. You can take people out without actually having to turn in the guy who's paying your checks.
Right. And there's good money in it.
Yeah. And of course, speaking of the man who's paying the checks, he may not make payroll this week, which leads to what his gambit is going to be in this episode, which is, if Luke Cage is here to defend Harlem, let's squeeze Harlem and see if Harlem can give up Luke Cage.
Right.
And basically tells everyone, if they've got a dime, I want a nickel, and starts this hardcore effort to shake down everyone. And of course, during this whole thing is also the backdrop of the preparation of Pop's funeral.
Right.
So as if the violation of Switzerland wasn't bad enough.
Right.
Now, as we're all prepping for Pop's funeral, Cornell is going to make a war with the people of Harlem in hopes that feeds for him into his war with Luke Cage.
Yeah, and it erodes people's confidence in Luke Cage and makes them question whether having him is a good thing or not.
Yeah, although what one of Cottonmouth's underlings says to him in that moment at the very beginning is like, let's talk. Maybe we can have benign neglect. Maybe we just let Luke Cage be.
Yeah. And
everything can come back to some sort of normalcy. Because Luke Cage is mad about what we did. Maybe we should let him be. Let him have his side of the street. Let him rebuild his Switzerland, if you will. Just to read a little more into what he said.
Maybe grow it a little bit,
Yeah. And then, of course, what is Cottonmouth's response?
He shoots that guy in the head.
Yeah.
He's losing his mind here. This is sort of seems like where he's just going to start making mistakes.
Yeah. Well, he is definitely making mistakes. He's definitely not the Cottonmouth we've come to know and love here. I do feel. Now, along those same lines, Cottonmouth has decided that he's going to, press on to Harlem. Shades basically tells him this is a bad idea. It's a position of weakness.
Yeah.
And Shades disagrees. Cornell disagrees. And
because he has a bigger plan to get the guns back and sell them to Domingo again and get the money back.
And for what it's worth, Cornell does need to show his power.
Yeah, he needs to stroke his ego. His ego is what's taking the most damage here, and that's the part that bothers him the most. So, he tells him, this isn't – because Shades tells him, he goes, you're not going to recoup $7 million by shaking down mom and pop stores. Yeah. And he's like, that's not what it's for. I mean, I've got a deeper plan to get that money back, but I need my ego to be bandaged up a little bit right now. I need to go flex and let people know who's boss.
Yeah, and I think, it is about his ego, but I think there's actually even more to it there, which is that he knows his power will fade. Essentially, as in show business, you're only as good as your last performance.
Right.
And right now he's looking weak.
Right.
And we know there are the Dominicans and the Colombians and the Haitians and the Russians. Let's never forget the Russians because they're all over the place here. And not to mention just good old Wilson Fisk's crew. They're all out there, and they know what Cornell is building, maybe crumbling, and maybe it's time to take it. And when Shade suggests he sells the club, Cornell makes this very strong point about nobody black has ever held a kingdom like this. He says Percy Sutton came close, which I believe was a Prohibition era mobster. I think he was sort of the basis for Chalky White in what do you call it? Boardwalk Empire. Yeah, when they did Chalky White, it's basically supposed to be sort of Percy Sutton, who was the guy who had the big club in Harlem, and also had the bootlegging racket going on. And or I could be completely mistaken on that, but I believe that's what my brain is telling me, and I believe my brain. I don't know why it's lied to me so often, but but yeah. So he says, no one black has ever done this before. No one black has ever taken over a territory like this and really held it, and both for his own aggrandizement and for to tie it all back to the Mariah Hillard's storyline, it is in its own way for the betterment of the people of Harlem, in the same way that the Kingpin saw his building of his empire as better for everyone as well.
Do you get that from Cornell? That's a genuine motivation for him?
Well, I think in the sense that, what it is? He knows there's a great line about Dr. Doom in the comics, which is that it is not so much that Dr. Doom is noble as Dr. Doom wants to be a great man and knows that great men are noble. And so he will put on this nobility because he wants to be a great man. And I think from Cornell's perspective, it is this idea that he wants to be this great man. He wants to be.
But he knows. He knows it's not for Harlem. I don't think he's unclear on what his motivations are there. I mean, it's like if you go back to that scene where him and Mariah are sitting on that bench, and she's trying to pitch her side of what her vision is, and he's trying to say, hey, we are who we are, and we've got to fight for ourselves. Forget Harlem, in a sense, Yeah,
I don't think he was saying forget Harlem there. I think he was reminding Mariah how she got her place. That essentially what he's saying to Mariah is, essentially know the blood and skulls that your empire is built upon, And I think that's the counter argument from Mariah's like, we don't need to be criminals anymore. Because Mariah's point in this, and Mariah's point from the first episode was, we don't need to be criminals. We have built ourselves. We have our assets. We can now be landed gentry.
Right.
And Cornell's perspective is, no. First off, we can never truly be landed gentry in this country because, we are criminals. We are our history is this, and our people are this.
Right.
And, Mama Mabel did what she did basically by blackmailing, these freaky old rich guys into doing what she wanted because she had the tape of whatever their particular joy was, and not wanting that to get out. That everything that Mariah is based on this criminality, and it is wrong for her in Cornell's mind to say we can't build that, we can't to say that isn't still a part of it. And for what it's worth, he's right. If he wasn't doing the shakedown, if he wasn't doing the, hey, make sure you donate to Mariah Hillard,
right?
She wouldn't be where she is. And and for what it's worth, that's classic machine politics. You had the same situation. Whether it was the Irish or the or the Italians or the English before them, it was always whatever the impoverished group but that had a vote was. It was okay. You give us the vote and you give us a little money too. Maybe we're going to take care of you on the back end. And often we're building something for everyone, just as our great Mariah Hillard says. Now, of course, basically there is a lot of trouble with Cottonmouth's plan. He is pushing everyone real hard, but rather than everyone giving up Luke Cage, essentially the opposite happens, where everyone comes to Luke Cage and says, Luke, you got to fix this. And it's one lady in particular. I want to say her name was Letitia, whose father, he played with the Mets. When they went to the World Series, he has a ring, and they stole his ring. And now he, of course, is he's hit the crack at this point, so he's not totally good. But in the end, it is this idea that this is something that was important to her. That they're taking things. They're not just taking money. They're taking the things that have value to them.
Right.
And of course that's the mistake, because whether it's the Les Paul, which our local hipster has to have a hissy about, or the stripper who lost all her tips, and never steal a stripper's tips, man, because
that's a dangerous proposition.
It's just wrong. That woman worked dang hard for those tips. You don't take a stripper's tips, man. That's just you're just really asking for the gods to come down on you. And that's what happens is Luke Cage comes and just thwacks, and the guys are down. And we do get to this point where where essentially Luke Cage is pushed, to engage, which he does not want to do, because of course this is Pop's funeral, and he wants to go to Pop's funeral. We get a nice cameo by I guess a local celebrity in the Harlem community by the name of Dapper Dan. Who when I first thought was actually, in my mind I thought it was Fancy Dan, who was a martial arts expert villain in the Spider-Man comics. But no, this is Dapper Dan. He's an actual guy who is like apparently a famous tailor uptown, and he gets Luke's suit together. And they do make the point that they paid Dapper Dan for this service, because I'm sure Dapper Dan doesn't want people coming to his shop saying, "Well, but I'm like Luke Cage in that show. I got this important thing to do, and this was an important." It's like, I'm Dapper Dan. I do this for the money.
Right.
Maybe he gave Luke Cage the friends and family discount. I don't know, but. But so Luke goes. He does retrieve everybody's things. Letitia isn't yet appeased.
No.
Oh, and of course we do get a nice scene again with Bobby Fish, where he is again hinting strongly to the idea of heroes for hire. We're going to get more of that, although we haven't yet gotten a direct idea of it yet. But he does hint at it before everything goes down. After Luke has basically dealt with all the bad guys, they go to Pop's funeral. And the first person we hear speaking at Pop's funeral is actually Pop's son, which I thought was kind of a great way to open it, because of course we did get the callback to Pop's son earlier in this episode, or not this episode, but the season, where basically Pop says, he hasn't seen his son in so long. And he has this recurring nightmare where his son comes in and sits in his chair, and he doesn't realize that it's his son until after he's gone. And of course, here you have his son essentially saying, to some extent, that, that same nightmare was his, and that nightmare is his reality now, because he says, I have often said that my father was only there for me at the conception.
Right. So is the implication there that the son knew all along where Pops was and just didn't come to see him, and now he's here regretting it?
I think that's the implication. Well, it's not like Pops was living undercover,
Right, that's true.
He was at Pops' barbershop, He knew who his dad was, but, his dad, and, for what it's worth, I would wager that Pops probably knew where his son was. And that it's this thing that estrangement kept them apart.
Right.
And now there's no way to reconnect. And of course, after that, Cornell goes up and gives his big speech.
Well, actually, Luke gets up about to, and then Cornell gets up, and it's sort of like an interesting moment right there where he sits down so Cornell can go, because that's the power structure. Yeah.
Although, as we quickly see, that was probably the worst move, because, you never make the opening move. That's the first, we've talked about how chess is a very, is a recurring theme in this. And, the guy who makes the opening move is always at the disadvantage because there's always a counter move to any move. And so when Luke sits down and Cornell makes his speech, and he makes a pretty good speech, about, Pops, and really kind of making his argument for the importance of organized criminality, which of course is this theme here, which is the theme through all of these. When you have these mobsters in it,
right,
they come from a place of, look, we serve a purpose. We are here to keep order. Because, of course, the police aren't going to keep order against random crime. There is no way to keep order except for the criminals to be held in place by a power structure of criminality. And so that, which is, a probably a rather circular argument, but, we're not going to go into that tonight.
Right. I don't disagree with it, though. It sounds sort of logical. I just think, you can't help but want to grow it past where it's, it services the community, and that's where it runs into problems. But eliminating all of it is sort of an unreachable goal, though, right?
Well, of course. Well, because the inherent problem with the idea of it is that there is no honor among thieves. That if you are, and there's no honor among thieves, and, so many people are thieves. If whether you're a thief on Main Street or Wall Street or Avenue C in Washington, D.C., everyone is a thief in their own right. And there is no honor. There is no honor because what people are trying to do is to get ahead. Because their motivation, even when they have that idea of, I wish to be this noble benefactor, it's still that self-aggrandizement of, I want to be the noble benefactor. I want to be the one who is the hero, which is, of course, why you have this recurring theme of reluctance from Luke Cage in his heroism, not because he doesn't necessarily want to be a hero or doesn't necessarily or isn't necessarily the best person to be a hero. It's because we're establishing the fact that he is not in this for himself, that he's basically being pulled in. There is this, there's a thing in Parliament that when you are elected the Speaker of the Parliament, you have, it's the ceremony where all the members of his party drag him to the podium. Because the idea is that if you wanted to be Speaker of the Parliament, you were not the right person to be the Parliament, to lead the Parliament. And so, you have to be drugged there. And then, of course, it's all very, staged. Like, no, you must be our speaker. And that's how you get there. The actual original, start of this actually started when King Henry VIII started beheading the heads of Parliament. So no one actually did want it. But it has continued on to this day, and it does exist as sort of a statement of false modesty. And that is sort of what we're getting with Luke Cage here, is he does not want to be the hero, but he has been forced to step up because, of course, between Pops' death and then Chico's death and then just the squeezing of Harlem, he realizes that, he didn't start this fight. He didn't want to be in this, but people have decided he has to be a part of it.
Right.
And so after Cornell gives his speech, Luke gives his speech, brings the house down, and
Right.
Cornell realizes,
and make some pretty pointed remarks about, being careful about bullies, especially when they claim to be friends.
Exactly.
And that carries really well.
Let's not forget who shot Switzerland.
Yes.
That's the point, is that there was a Switzerland. There was that, for all his talk about, the noble order of the criminal empire, when push came to shove, it weren't there.
Right.
He tossed that aside he didn't toss it aside, but it got tossed aside because you cannot trust, because there is no honor among thieves. There is no effort to move that forward. Right. So, after it's all come and done, of course there is the aftermath, because of course, you could end on that high note, but they're not going to end this episode on a high note. Then we get a conversation between Misty and Luke about it, where she basically tells Luke, you just started a war, and you may be bulletproof, but Harlem isn't.
Right.
But
neither, the way out of this situation isn't going to be bullet free either.
Exactly.
So it's like, wouldn't it be nice to have the bulletproof guy on your side?
Exactly. And as Luke says, he didn't start it, but at this point he's got to finish it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was pretty much the episode. It was a really strong episode, I felt. I mean, it's maybe a little more talky, and there is no challenge to Luke's superhumanity here. He is just
a little bit. There's that fight in the club where they shoot at him again, and he beats up a couple of thugs. I thought that was pretty fun.
Oh no, it's fun. I'm just saying, there's no point where this is definitely a 1970s Hulk battle. This is definitely you're really out of your element here. This is you brought guns to a bulletproof guys fight. It's
right.
It's like years. I'm a big guy, as Mozz knows. That's why I call him my skinny rich friend. And I've been mugged a couple times. And they always punch me in the jaw, and I always tell them to stop it, because it is annoying. When people punch you in the jaw, and it does hurt a bit. It stings, but and I've always had these guys sort of look back when after they do that, and now no one has ever gotten money off of me, probably because after they punch me in the jaw, I do look back at them and say, "Stop it." But, that's sort of how I see these scenes. Now, if someone actually pulled out a gun with me, I'm not going to be telling them to stop it, but I'm not Luke Cage. And this is the Luke Cage version of the Charlie Esser moment of stop it, Could you please stop shooting me? These shirts cost money. It's actually, there's a great, bit back in the 90s, Luke Cage was hanging out with Moon Knight, and he was working with Moon Knight, and this was back when Luke Cage was wearing the silk shirts, the silk pirate shirts and the tiara, and he was just complaining about, man, every time they shoot me, these shirts are custom tailored, man, they're not cheap. And gets to a great point where he's saying, man, I got to get myself some bulletproof shirts like you have, Moon Knight. And Moon Knight says, let me tell you, I've had bulletproof shirts and bulletproof skin. Trust me, bulletproof skin is better. Okay.
He could probably make some money selling those bullet-ridden shirts on the corner or whatnot. People would buy them, I'll bet.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm going to say this right now, Mozz. Spoilers! Yeah. Yeah, you wait, man. You're gonna see that, and then you're gonna say, "Oh man, I know what I need to buy next week." Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's been our episode this week. Mozz, if people wanted to reach out to you, how can they find you?
You can find me on Facebook at Mozz Manzor, MozzManzor, or you can email me at mozzmanzor@gmail.com.
Beautiful. And, of course, you can always write to me in that old-fashioned email way at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. And, of course, if you want to follow me on the Twitters, as the kids do nowadays, find me at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the two E's in the middle for quality. Sweet Christmas, ladies and gentlemen. That has been one other episode of the CageCast. Come step into the cage with us again next week, when hopefully I can pronounce the outro better. Good night.